Star Citizen needs more content to make it a true game, and one of the things that they are adding and have been adding are dynamic events, and there was a Q&A from Cloud Imperium where they answered a load of questions on the aforementioned subject and gave us a lot of tangible information and plans for events in the future and lessons learned from the ones they've already run. I'll be summarising this here into two major sections, current events and future events, and I'll put the links to the full AMA in the description down below. Are dynamic events really necessary with the current state of the servers and desync? Building dynamic events and running them now is absolutely necessary and beneficial as an important part of the development of the game. They act as testbeds that expose problems in both event mission systems and interplay of other gameplay systems, as well as back-end systems. The features, discoveries, and learnings that we take from building and running these events now leads to even better events further down the line. Why did Xenothreat have military spec, Idris M's, and fighters? The Xenothreat's law is that they're mostly ex-Navy, so it's reasonable to assume that they have access to Navy shipyards and mil-spec equipment. Also, they prefer to fly ships they were accustomed to. That's the excuse that they're using and they're sticking to it. Will future dynamic events offer reputation-based rewards, and will there be more counter-mission-based rewards as well? So will I be able to choose to go with Xenothreat or the CDF in the future, rather than just with the CDF against Xenothreat? So this answer is pretty important, and I want to read it word for word. Whenever it is we next run the Xenothreat event, it is my personal hope and intent that we will have the necessary clarity of markers to deliver it with a counter mission for Xenothreat supporters. So if the assumption is that we get a counter mission, my assumption would be that rewards based on rep would be available. This is not mine to promise, but I do see it as the next big and exciting thing to properly tackle. Plans have been made on improving the way we communicate things like hostility, lawful right to attack, and ally status based on track missions, which will make these epic encounter missions possible. So I think that was really interesting as an answer, because they basically say, look, we are making a lot of these dynamic missions and dynamic events, and much more sort of like you can choose sides, and there's a lot more going on with them, and it sounds like they're going to be running the Xenothreat event again in the future, potentially just occasionally every so often and updating it. That's what it sounds like to me. I'm interested to know what you think in the comments below. Are dynamic events triggered manually, or is there some logic in place that triggers the event based on a condition? Currently, these events are triggered manually. It's absolutely planned to have these events be driven by Quanta and player actions in the future. We will be talking about this a bit at Digital CitizenCon, so tune in for more information on that. We are working extremely hard to build a system that can and will react to conditions that are running on a back-end simulation, while this still involves some level of probabilistic math. The intent is that missions will activate based on some sort of benchmark being reached, so either a player's interaction within the world or through some level of virtual AI decisions that have caused some level of imbalance in the world. It's not going to be like purely RNG based. There are going to be RNG numbers being used, but it's often for things like which cluster of enemies are going to be thrown at you during an encounter. The bottom line is that they want a world to be something that players can understand and potentially learn what warning signs to look for. So if X is happening, then Y is also likely to happen. That said, this won't prohibit them from randomly triggering things in-game for certain things. Will we see more Ninetales events pop up now that Xenothreat's over? Likely yes, though running these is always a conversation with several other departments. We might hold off until after 3.15. I would like to get some minor fixes in. That being said, Ninetales Lockdown is an evergreen event, so it's intended to run occasionally and forever. We just want to avoid burning you all out on it, particularly when we know there are issues. What do you feel was missing in the Ninetales event that made it less engaging than Xenothreat? Really like that question, because it's true. The Xenothreat stuff was really engaging, really enjoyed it and loved it. Ninetales stuff is a bit lackluster, in my opinion. The answer here is great, because it's a mini post-mortem. Insufficient medical supplies. There aren't enough medical supplies available for haulers to participate freely in the event. For Ninetales Lockdown, some of you who participated in the very first Evocati test might actually remember that there were shop mods that made it so that shops selling medical supplies had their inventories and sell inventories boosted, much like the station has its buy inventory capacity boosted. We decided to remove those mods to emphasize the derelicts due to the Xenothreat feedback. Thanks to Ninetales feedback that has come in, I was able to rehash that conversation, and I've hooked up the shop mods for sale locations back up for 3.15. That's really great to hear, because we want shop mods. Really, I just want to be able to sell my inventories to shops and if I sell a huge amount of something to a shop, like a huge inventory, they just pay me less for it. They just go, yeah, you've got a load of this resource, I'll take it all now, but you're going to get less for it. Perfect, I don't care, just give me the money. I don't want to have to wait there for several years. But yeah, I understand why the shop mods exist. We're a bit worried this will be too profitable, but an enjoyable experience is worth a little temporary economic destabilization, and this is something that can be tuned. Longer term improvements to the shop system should also help this. I don't understand what they mean by economic destabilization. In the current build of the game, where, yeah, we can send each other money, but most people have the stuff they want, and it doesn't damage the game by having everyone have $20 billion, or 20 billion Alpha UEC at the moment. At the moment, during testing, during the stuff, people are still going to be playing the missions and want to do things rather than want to accrue things. At least that's my personal view on that. So let's have a look at more of this little mini post-mortem. Players not playing the Ninetales side. This is the most painful one for me. Based on our analytics, for every one Ninetales aligned player, there were 20 Crusader aligned players. Short term, they're looking at ways to increase the rewards for Ninetales, but if they're being honest, they expect them to have very little impact. Now, I'd at least like them to see them change that. So, if they have huge risk reward for being a Ninetales player, great. Longer term, I've requested some tech to deal with the Ninetales aligned players being sent to jail, and once players can obtain Ninetales reputation, my hope is that they can move away from using crime stats as a determiner for participation, and thus have players be a bit more long term in what sides they want to align with. The event is too short, is another problem, so many players were unable to participate in the event because it ends before they could get there. The prologue phase had been set to 1 hour, and they thought that would be sufficient. They're probably going to be extending the prologue on the future so people can actually log in and play and get there. They've also asked that in the future, at least until they have a large enough stable sort of set of events that will allow players to regularly log in and have something to do. They want to have a bit more outside the game warning for Ninetales or Xenothreat or whatever event so that people can play. There's a sort of counter side to this in the mini post-mortem here, but the event was too long and repetitive. So the hope is that this will naturally evolve a bit. So one of their least favourite pieces of the event right now is that they send out AI ships to go and scan, and the players have to defend them during that event. Now, they want players to be able to do the scanning as well. So once long-distance scanning becomes a thing, maybe they will. The Ninetales lockdown doesn't feel like a blockade. While flying in, you're not attacked nearly enough by the Ninetales AI. This is one of the things that they saw coming, but it's not a fixable sort of thing in the short term. It's actually a performance problem combined with a few AI problems. The ships are taking a long time to spawn, and you've already flown by, and they don't pursue you, so they don't fly fast enough to catch you. Performance will be an ongoing fight, and they're talking about solutions to the rest of that stuff currently. So, hopefully, Ninetales lockdown will be a lot better in 3.15. We'll have to wait and see, I suppose. Future events. So they talked a lot about different things like JumpTown version 2 and some of the lessons learnt here that are going to be applied to future events. The trading stock and replenish rates can be painfully slow. For JumpTown 2, are there going to be any potential changes for this, following similar indications from Ninetales Lockdown where players were unable to adequately resupply medical supplies? This question was answered in 2 parts, JumpTown 2 and Ninetales. So for JumpTown 2, barring any unforeseen bugs, they're going to be spawning the drugs physically rather than having you buy them from a shop, and then have boxes made available to spawn every 30 seconds or so on a server. They felt this was a more interesting thing gameplay-wise, as carrying the cargo out to your ship adds a layer of complexity. Physicalized cargo will make this more standard across the game as well, but they didn't want to wait for physicalized cargo before doing it like this. They want to go, actually, let's get it in now. It is a more PvP-centered event, or at least there are going to be other people there, and other people vying to get these things, so bear that in mind. It is certainly going to have some friction with other players. Also, as we said earlier, they've hooked in shop mods for 3.15. And when we have JumpTown version 2, it's going to be that shops that are buying the goods are going to go, we have a huge capacity to buy these goods. So you're not going to have huge downtimes where you're having to sell your items really slowly. Other than JumpTown 2, are there any plans for a ground-based dynamic event? Cloud Imperium said, yes, we want to incorporate more ground-based scenarios once we have AI capable of navigating on the planet's surfaces. Dynamic events will ultimately trigger all over the verse based on various conditions being hit that are relevant to the specific mission. This could be at something as small as an outpost or an underground facility, to comm arrays, stations, and even major landing zones requiring FPS gameplay or spaceships. Tony Zorovic's upcoming CitizenCon presentation will get into some additional details, but rest assured, we want this type of content happening all over the universe, not just for larger scale space battles. Will some of the future events have high risk sort of reward, different sides that you can choose, and reputation items that you can get by, choosing the Xenothreat side over the CDF side? Yes, we want to be able to do this. Currently, we replay events to get as much data as possible and help us refine the implementations of a system and mechanics that are a focus of a load of those events. Also, we are building our mission logic in a modular way, and as our array of modules increases, we will be able to build these events far faster. The story elements and locations of any given event can then be one aspect of the focus to make them more unique, and some of them one-offs. So you're not going to have some missions that are super grindable like the Xenothreat one was. You're going to have ones that are sort of like one-offs or very, very rarely done, things like that. Can we expect to see video feeds via Mobiglass instead of still images during events? Yes, we're going to be able to see Dooley's face in the mission comms one day. Technically, there's always going to be some scenarios in which NPCs are supposed to be on comms, and they call a player, the NPC doesn't stream in yet or whatever, so they'll have backup systems in the future, so static or something like that, or a placeholder image that is much more diegetic if it doesn't work properly. Do you see what I mean? So they want streaming in of sort of players' faces, NPCs' faces, and them talking to you where sensible. What things have you learned, and are you going to change with regards to crime stats for lawful players during these events? We've learned a lot from the current run of Xenothreat, as well as the first release, which was our attempt at a large-scale feat battle, and as such we learned a lot about the kind of issues that are only present when many players and AI get together in one place and fight. The major standouts we wanted to address for the second release were our simplistic friendly fire system, which led to unfair crime stats. We made major strides in how friendly fire is attributed, which drastically cuts down the number of unfair crime stats awarded according to feedback and analytics they received during this event, and it allows them to more accurately identify the remaining edge cases. This actually changes a lot of stuff and improves various aspects of the game, so not just for the event, but it paves the way for more large-scale battles in the future. Now that the system is generally fairer, a lot of the noise has been cut out, and we are now able to identify the specific remaining issues. I can see there is still work to do on the collision side, so that will be our next focus, as well as some changes I'm sure backers will love, but they can't apparently go into that in detail yet. How will the future of dynamic events take advantage of all the space and interesting locations in Stanton and not be subjected to one particular area in the corner? One thing you need to keep in mind is that we're using the current events that we have to build out necessary tech to prove out a scenario for a single location before we try and trigger them in any of the other locations in the verse. So this helps us zero in on issues related to the mission logic, as well as identifying any location markup that the mission may need. Maybe there's no reason to mark up every possible location until you know exactly what setup needs are. Oftentimes we refine the experience as we go as well, so what we initially implement might not be the final experience, and there's no sense going wide until we're happy with it. That said, these will ultimately be something that can happen in as many locations as possible. So as our technology continues to grow, I would expect that more and more of our locations get utilised with the content we're pushing forward with. Are there any plans for non-combat profession-centred dynamic events involving mining or refining? Ideally, we will have dynamic events that cover the entire breadth of our content and feature sets. As soon as we have mining functional with the core missions, something you can take from a mission giver or a contract manager, I expect us to look at ways to incorporate these into dynamic events. You got to also remember that Xenothreat did have cargo moving as part of it, and they obviously want to potentially have repair and salvage and all that sort of stuff available in the future. Boom, that's it for my summary of the Dynamic Events AMA. I'm looking forward to future events. It is how a massive amount of the content of the game is going to be displayed to us. Obviously, it's going to be making use of all the different gameplay loops as they come into the game, and I would expect to see hundreds and hundreds of events in the future across the different systems, all running simultaneously, like JumpTown V2, which is one we're going to have in our hands next. But I also just want lots of missions and events available at the same time, and yeah, you know, content. Give me content! But what do you think? Are you looking forward to JumpTown V2? And what did you think of Xenothreat? Do you like the Ninetales lockdown as it is, or is it a bit lackluster? Whatever your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Some people say I shill for NordVPN, but listen to some of these comments that I just made up. I've never felt the love of a woman before, but then I got NordVPN, and that didn't matter. Doctor said I'd never walk again, but then I got NordVPN. Now I've been running marathons. Also, I got robot legs around the same time. They might have helped somewhat too. I was a tone-deaf pirate, but after getting NordVPN, I'm able to play the saxophone. Go on, Zin, try and animate all of this. Click the links below to get NordVPN. It might lead you to a more fulfilling life, but more likely, it will just help protect you from the terrors of the internet. Every month we have a ship giveaway. For September, it's for another Mercury Star Runner. I love that ship. It's a great way to try a huge portion of Star Citizen's gameplay. If you want a chance of winning that, just comment on any of my videos made during the month. If you'd like to further support the channel, be sure to check out that join button underneath my videos. There's also links to my Patreon, which also helps loads as well, direct donations, and just commenting, subscribing, liking, all that sort of jazz goes a huge way to helping the channel. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You take care, and I hope to see you in the verse.